Martin Luther King speech graduate. I was there also. We seem to have a lot in common in age and everything else, except perhaps for talent. I want to thank Vincent and crew for opening my heart, and I'm really grateful that we have at Pinchot University the Center for Inclusive Entrepreneurship, which works with battered moms from battered moms from shelters and Ethiopian immigrants and tribal people and so forth, helping them to launch businesses. It's good to be a little bit part of that huge movement to actually make a difference where poverty lies. I'm struggling a bit with Carol's abundance because one of the big things in my life is climate change, which I think is one of the biggest social justice issues of our time. If we're going to starve 5 billion people to death, how are we going to do that in a socially just way? Are we going to do it by lottery? I don't think so. So I'm glad that one of our graduates is saving a couple of million tons of carbon every year. I think that's good, and lots more are doing things. But today, because I'm kind of a dreamer, I'm going to try to get very concrete and just focus down on bureaucracy and the fact that I think that bureaucracy is part of a system that is driving us values-free over the cliff. And how do we open up bureaucratic systems? And so when we started what's now called Pinchot, we thought, where can we have an effect? We've been activists, we've worked on investor issues, not so much on customers, but we thought, what's going on with people inside the business may be a leverage point that hasn't been addressed sufficiently. So I want to talk about 3 ways in which you can bring order in an organization and contrast them. One is the chain of command, and I think we overuse this in our society. We always default to the chain of command. If we know, organizations get in trouble, what happens? We centralize control and try and fix the system. But I think equally important in driving the way systems work is the power of community and self-organization through choices, and I want to explore both of those opportunities. So when David Cutler was forming the Windows NT team, Windows NT was the first really good operating system at Microsoft, and he had 250 programmers working on this. And let's say that we're working in a little team, and we figure out how to fix a major bug in the system. And the weekly build comes out, and now all the rest of us do not have to go through this terrible workaround to avoid a bug in the system. I'm heading for the water cooler. Do I need David Cutler to tell me I'm cool? I do not. Everybody knows I'm cool. We get a little too big for our britches. We try to fix another code, but we work a little too fast, and we crash the whole system. Am I going to the water cooler? Dehydration sets in, right? Do I need David Cutler to tell me I screwed up? I don't. So when you think about what people are doing, and the way David Cutler did this is he said, we will let the dogs eat their own dog food. He said, let's kick that other operating system that we're using to develop this system off and actually live within the system we're creating so that the contributions of everybody in the system become clear. And when the contributions of people become clear, the force of community kicks in. Lewis Hyde wrote a book called The Gift, The Erotic Life of Property, and he contrasts exchange economies and gift economies. In an exchange economy, we get status from what we have. In a gift economy, we get status from what we give away. And when people think of gift economies, they often think of people, tribal peoples, for example, and the potlatch in the Pacific Northwest is the typical example where chiefs competed to see who could give away the most blankets. But there are other things that work that way. When you give a dinner party, people come to your house, and your status is determined by how good the food that you serve is, right? It works that way. But it doesn't just stop there. Let's take science. When a professor goes to an event, they give a lecture. They do not exchange a lecture for other lectures. And in fact, if you think of two scientists, one of whom knows everything in the field and the other makes contributions to the field, which gets the good job? Which is the high status faculty member? The contributor to the field or the owner of knowledge? There's no question about this, is there? So what we see is that many of the systems which we depend upon, many of the systems which make our civilization what it is, whether it's science, nonprofits, open source, and so forth, are all working in the gift economy, which is the force behind community. And in fact, this is the motivation for everyday work. When you stay up all night working on a project so you can go into the project team the next day and have your part of it done, do you do that because you think you're going to get a promotion? Or do you do it because you don't want to look bad in the face of your peers and you want to be seen as a contributor? What actually makes us do what we do has more to do with the gift economy than it does the exchange economy. And this is one of the big missing thought patterns in the way in which management is conducting, because often the way in which hierarchy is working is to kill the community, the force of community in the system. So there are three systems of control, as I mentioned before. I want to talk about choice. Now, what organizations hit the wall of complexity first? You say we look back in history, where did the first organizations begin to hit the wall of complexity, where the chain of command, a simple chain of command, was just not sufficient anymore? It's not the one I've chosen. Well, I'll you know, in the interest of time, I'll speed on and say that, that nations probably first hit the wall of complexity. So if we study the pattern of the evolution of nations, we can maybe get some clues as to the pattern of evolution of large organizations of a smaller sort. So here's the beginning of a nation. You have a king, and they have various people reporting to the king, and that system brought about the ability to conquer larger territories, perhaps, than just the sense of community. And lo and behold, we copy that in our organizations, right? But the next thing that came about was empire. And if you look down there at those local kings and queens or barons or whatever you want to call them, those are actually able to bring a lot of order in their local community. Some of it is being in German, some of it in French, and so forth. The empire can span a larger area than a simple monarchy can. And lo and behold, this is DuPont in 1920s, and it formed basically its own empire by acquiring a bunch of other things, and pretty soon they had general managers of this and that, and this was able to handle a more complex organization that could be handled by a simple functional organization. But nations didn't stop here. This is a confederation of entrepreneurs. You see an Italian city-state. The king or duke or whatever it is up there. Yeah, there's a hierarchically controlled army, but down there in the cutaway, you see people trading spices and so forth, and they do not report to the king. Their success and failure is based on the fact that they can add value by buying cheaply and selling for more, right? And those have grown up to be the corporations which dominate our society today. So this is a different system for bringing order, and it's pretty clear that it outperforms the totalitarian state in terms of innovation, productivity, et cetera, art, you name it. So management consultants followed this with a virtual organization. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a relatively small chain of command, and we're going to outsource everything. Let's take the example of the IBM PC. We outsourced the box, no problem. We outsourced the keyboard, no problem. We outsourced the operating system and the chip. Oops. Intel and Microsoft now dominate, and IBM is out of the business. This is a second-order mistake. The first mistake was imagining that IBM knew what were the things which would dominate the industry, which was service and marketing, which didn't turn out to be the right things. It turned out that the chip and the operating system were more important. But the second-order problem here was choosing a way of organizing such that you had to be right, otherwise you were out of business. Now that's a bigger mistake. So let's look at what we can do. Here's a poor user down at the bottom of an organization. They need help from a corporate staff group. They're not getting what they want, so they complain to his boss, who complains to her boss, who complains to his boss, who complains to her boss, until the staff group finds out about it and punishes everyone in the chain of command for disrespect, right? I know what we'll do. We'll divisionalize this. So the complainer complains to his boss, who complains to her boss, who complains to his boss, who complains to her boss, and so on, up the chain of command until the divisional staff group finds out about it and punishes everyone, right? You can see that this is actually a system for empowering the barons, but it does very little actually for the people who are doing the work. Centralization and decentralization are alternative flavors of bureaucracy, and the problem is bureaucracy. This is why we alternate back and forth between centralization and decentralization, because we're solving the wrong problem. The user down here is selling clinical analyzers, and their largest client, the New York Blood Bank, says, we need a software system to track every pint of blood going through the system. They go to their local staff IT function, can't do it. They go to the corporate function, say 3 years and $10 million, we might be able to do it for you. People are dying every day from blood which is polluted with AIDS. Something has to be done faster than that. What to do? And it turns out that over there in a different division, fibers, IEA is developing software in a very effective way, and they agree to take on the project. They can do it in 90 days and for less than $1 million. This works. More people find out about it. Pretty soon this little group, which was 5 people, grows to 50 people providing service all over DuPont. And of course they get shut down because corporate IT finds out about them, and they're really making fools of corporate IT, which is, so now we lose this great capacity. You can see that you don't even have to push this down into the system. This is AT&T. The user has a choice between 2 PR departments. That little one rapidly grows because it's providing what you want when you want it and showing up the main PR organization. So it's not about centralization. We end up with the intelligent organization. In this system, you see something very much like the virtual organization, but inside it are lots of little enterprises which are providing value. If you make a mistake about strategy, you still have the capacities inside your organization. Here's an example of free enterprise. This is happening in the US Forest Service, a bunch of enterprise teams that do things like road and trail building, database programming, recreational planning, and so forth. Laurie, would you stand up? Laurie is an enterprise team leader, so if you want to know more about this, you might want to contact her afterwards. What is going on here is that these groups, according to groups sent in to shut them down, are 1.8 times as productive as the average Forest Service employee. If we had that level of productivity in the federal government, we wouldn't have a deficit. The enterprises have rules, and this is, they can set their own prices, they can deal with whoever they want, they can put their receipts in a bank, and they can't be fired as long as there's money in their bank account. They're free, they don't have bosses anymore. It's a fundamentally different system. And it creates a complex adaptive system. The quality of relationships between the parts is a key to what's going on here. Dominance and submission brings out the worst in people. A peer-to-peer relationship in which both parties have a choice as to whether to engage in it or not works very well. It brings out trust. It supports a bunch of mavericks in the system, which brings about the kind of diversity that you need in a system. You share information across boundaries. Those little groups are going around from hierarchical organization to hierarchical organization, spreading what they're learning. And we see that everything is evolving as opposed to being planned from above. So that's it. Thank you very much.